Hey, good morning. Welcome to another episode of Wake Up and Ship More. I am your host, Joe from DevHub. Today we have a cool topic I think that is hopefully helpful to anyone who's actually looking to build in Web3 and thinking about how do I start to integrate some of this stuff without actually going full Web3 and what does it actually mean to do some of this stuff. I think there's a lot of misconceptions around uh, what it means to actually integrate things like blockchain into your product. So we're going to talk all about that. Today, again, if you haven't been following along, I just want to start with a couple different housekeeping things. So again, at the bottom here, we have our newsletter. We have a huge hackathon starting here in September, uh, called Redacted. It's also an IRL event as well, happening in Bangkok, hence Redacted Bangkok. Uh, you do not have to attend both, so you can do the online hackathon and not go to the event. You can skip the hackathon and just go to the event. All different things, but check out the website. You do need to actually fill out the form to apply to go. But if you are a builder, if you're interested in this stuff, if you're interested in user-owned AI, if you're interested in user-owned internet, the open web, things like that, this is the event and conference for you. So I definitely encourage you to check that out. If you are watching this on replay and you have questions, you want to just kind of have a conversation, if you want to join into things, there's a Telegram group. Again, it's scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Definitely check that out. Happy to always answer questions there. You can also, at any one of our different socials, you can actually reach out to us as well. So if you're watching this replay on like YouTube, our socials are listed inside there as well. And then also too, Race of Sloths is going to come back along here at the bottom of the screen. Race of Sloths is a way to be rewarded for open source contributions. It's a really cool program that's built right into GitHub directly. So if something that you're interested in, I encourage you to check that out. And again, if you have questions, that's being run through a grant through DevHub, and we are helping manage that as well. So if you're new here, so what is Near DevHub? Near DevHub is kind of everything in the Near protocol developer ecosystem. We provide support. We provide documentation, the engagement tutorials, anything like that. We also have support channels as well in Telegram if you're building, or if you're going to check out this hackathon. We are there to help with both talking through ideas and planning and whatever else it might be. So we are here for all of your developer needs within the Near protocol specifically. Now, we want to talk a little bit differently here, and I want to preface some stuff before I jump right into like decentralized identity and like user-owned identity. So a common misconception that comes up when I have these conversations with developers who are not really I guess well educated on like what is actually happening in Web3 or crypto, however you want to reference it, is that like the immediate stereotype and thought process is like it's just like degen nature type of stuff. It's just NFTs and gambling and all this other stuff. And at Near, the focus is definitely very different. So at Near, the focus is about building the open web, which again is a user-owned place where you own your own data. You have control over that. It decentralizes the systems there that are available. It's permissionless. Obviously, too, that we're working on a lot of AI stuff and user-owned AI as well. And that comes from, the two founders of Near being heavily into AI, and if you are quasi following along any of those narratives, so you probably have seen some of those different connections back to the original Transformers paper, Attention is All You Need, and things like that. And so I'm not going to go too far into that. You can certainly do your own research around that part of it. But I just want to highlight first that like we were talking about actually building actual products that are focused on open web, usability, user ownership, things like that. Not necessarily, just making meme coins and things like that. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but that's not what we're focused on. We actually want to ship real products here. So let's talk a little bit about centralized identity and like what that actually means and kind of how this fits into not just Web3 developers, but Web2 developers as well. Okay. So decentralized identity really is about user ownership. And I think this is an important topic because, one of the things that has come up over the years is that, more and more of our own personal data is getting locked into these larger centralized systems. And it's both like good and bad. So obviously, like the bad of it is, right, it's like you have a single point of failure. You have one particular thing controlling a lot of that information, and what they do with that information varies, and how your level of paranoia maybe also maybe affects how you feel about that. So for example, if you're using, let's say, Google, to log into everything, or Facebook or something like that, how much are they owning, and how much data they control and things like that. Also, though, too, of like, what does that role of that login actually play, and how does that start to simplify things? And I think, with OAuth and everything else, like, it certainly has actually improved a lot of the user experiences on the web. I personally use like Google Sign in a lot of places. It's convenient. I've used Google for a long time. I feel fairly comfortable with, the stuff I am choosing to share with them. So there's that. But there's this other side of it too, of like, where does how interoperable is that really going to be long term? At any time, Google can kind of change their mind and change how those controls work, or change what they have access to, or whatever it might be. And so those are things that are important. I don't, again, depending on your age and your experience and your memory, which mine isn't always the best either too, but if you look back at some of the stuff early on, especially like when Facebook was first moving to opening up their login system so you could actually log in with Facebook in different places, there was a big, I guess it was more of a big news story around just they were caught up in like, what are they actually tracking? You would see that like you were logged into Facebook on sites that you didn't even realize. So it was pulling in that data. So it just really became something I think that is overly contentious, for users. And I think now we're at a point where some of the stuff has become so ubiquitous that we don't recognize how much is really happening. And so we get caught up in that. So the thing that like we start to say, and the thing I really want to focus on here is like, let's take a question here. So you're building a product, and let's say your product involves some kind of profile, or whatever that might be. If your users could have that, take that identity from your app and use that across the entire web, so any other app they go to, the data that they want travels with them, but there's no actual like password necessarily needed. There's no central authority. Nobody can necessarily block it. Nobody can restrict what's there. And they have complete control over their data of what's actually being used, what's actually provided, things like that. That's a fairly compelling use case if you can implement it correctly, and if you can get adoption for it. And so it has to kind of start somewhere, right? So, the idea here is that, with decentralized identities, you're limiting that centralized piece, right? So if, Google's not going anywhere, right? But like, so that's a tough example to say, oh, if they go away, they're not going to go away anytime soon. But, again, things can get hacked. It becomes a single point of failure. If there's been times where, I don't know if it was Google specifically, but certain other logins where like there's been an outage, whether it's through like servers or through the actual full service, and now you can't get into anything because all your logins are tied to this one particular OAuth, and now you're stuck. So these are things that are real issues that do come up, that are possible. Some of them are very rare, but it's, again, something to think about. The part that I really think is compelling, especially if you are building products, especially if you are thinking about long term of like, can you build a product that becomes part of someone's everyday life, which I think is important, is you want to think about like, how much can I let my users own their own data? Like, why do I need to control all of that? One of the like, I guess like anxiety things that come up for me as a developer and someone who makes products is like, well, what if I don't want to do this anymore, but like other people still want to use my product? like what happens with all of that? Like how do I manage that? How do I manage those expectations? And so decentralizing some of that helps because it becomes permissionless and it becomes a way for users to continue to own that and have that control. The other thing here too is like when you are a smaller product, to take the pressure off of being reliant on a centralized system is really important. I can't tell you how many times over the years where I've tried to use a third-party service or I've integrated some kind of external library or something like that, and then like it gets deprecated at some point just randomly out of nowhere, and now I'm scrambling to deal with that, right? And it's just like if things are out of my control, or like again, if something goes down, I now don't have control over that. And it's hard, especially if you are a solo dev, to manage all of that. So these are opportunities I think that are there. I think it's important to understand too that like we're really not trying to say that the stuff in like Web3, again, whether you like that term or not, is trying to like overhaul and like replace the current internet. It's really trying to like upgrade it, and it's trying to do that in phases. And again, if you think of the promise of the original internet when it went commercial, was about like being the freedom and owning things, and having that kind of open nature of the web. And we've kind of gotten away from that for multitude of reasons that I won't get into, but like, so this is an opportunity to kind of focus back on that for the long term. And that's also important too as you think about the rise of AI and everything else that's happening around technology, that it's a good opportunity to put more power into your users' hands as well. So let's continue to talk a little bit about, though, some of the stuff here is, I would say we'll talk about some, I think, what I would call like risks and concerns that you have with a centralized system. And really with a centralized system here. So again, a traditional like a login system kind of looks like this, where again, I know I have some login form, right? And then from there, it's going to go to like a database, right? And then like if it's good, and we'll cycle back, and if it's good, we say, get that check, then this is going to go off into the actual like site, and then if it fails, whatever. And it's this fairly straightforward thing. You can there's a couple different things that can start to happen here. So one is obviously like this could get hacked, so that can be an issue. And again, hopefully you as a developer have taken the right precautions to handle if your database does get hacked, people's passwords aren't leaked and things like that. How that data is managed as well, we've seen over the years, even the things that are supposed to be like very secure and well thought out have not always done that. You also run into things about like account recovery and what that starts to look like. And sometimes for yourself, when you're building a product, like when I want to think about, again, not just like lost passwords, but like, hey, I don't know what email I used for this service, I don't know whatever else, like that can become a problem. And then again, it goes back into like, sure, if I don't want to have my own system here and I want to use some third party, again, like I want to use like Google login, sure, like you can certainly do that. And that is a great option. That certainly streamlines some things for your user, but not everybody actually uses Google. A lot of people use Google, and it's very well used, and so you're going to get most of your users, but not everybody will use that. Also, depending on your product, people might not want to like link their Google account to whatever their whatever your site is, whatever your product is. So these are all these different concerns that you have to start to be aware of when you're actually putting these things together. Where, and the other thing, I mean, never mind the fact that like when people are actually having to pick passwords, like, people are not very good at usually picking passwords. We still don't have enough saturation of like password managers. So that becomes problematic. So reusing passwords and things like that starts to become a problem. The other thing is, most of these systems become very difficult because a centralized system, especially like a Google or Facebook, like they're contingent on having a lot of data. And so they don't make it easy. You can request to have your data removed, but they don't certainly make it easy. And they also, like they kind of try to discourage some of that stuff too. So it's not always easy to really understand like where your data is being shared all the time, how it's being shared, things like that. Who truly has access to different stuff. And like if you ever go in, if you've had an account for like a long time and you go in and you look at like all the things you've given access to, like I mean sometimes you see these sites and you're like, I haven't seen that in 10 years and whatever. And so like you have to really be careful of how that all goes into there. So I think that's something to really consider when you're actually making identity systems and how you're making out these systems. So again, how does a decentralized system start to help this? Well, one is like there's no, there's now no like honeypot, right? So there's, here we'll say the nose, right? So there's no central spot. Okay. You know, you can obviously, use crypto proofs or cryptographic proofs we're talking here to store data that's sensitive. You can very easily set up selective disclosure. Okay. So, which you do not have in, you do not have in a centralized system. So, those are things that, you can certainly set that up, but that's more stuff that has to be obviously built out. There's no single point of failure. It's censorship resistant, things like that. Now, the thing that I think is really important here is that, when you go from service to service, you start to have really a not just your own data that's going around, but like it really starts to become like your identity, because with blockchain and especially like with crypto, you start to have a profile that can become a little bit more robust, that can involve things like, some basic financial stuff. It doesn't always have to be financial stuff. It can just be, again, what services you're using, how you're using it. And so as you start to do that, you really open yourself up to really having some creative stuff of, hey, my users can actually choose what to share. My user can have a singular experience all the way through. Apps can start to work together better. So now if you are leveraging some kind of smart contracts in the background as well, besides for just identity, they can start to talk to each other in a more easy manner. It becomes, again, permissionless. And so that integration is a really good selling point for a lot of your users. And that's something that, I think is important. The other thing too is because decentralized identity is based around, like, again, code and smart contracts and things like that. Privacy doesn't become like just like a policy on your site. It actually becomes, like code. It's what it's in there. It's baked into it. So I think that's a really important thing. You don't have to ever have people use a registration form in any sense. And again, I get that, like, again, if you're using something like Google Login, sure, you don't have to do that again either. But we're talking about like here where, especially if you are trying to put in your own system, I think that's really important. You don't have to have that registration form. You also start to have people coming in not so cold. And by cold, I mean, if you are building a product that maybe could leverage some of that information, like from another app, you can start to eliminate some of that cold start stuff where you have users who come in who maybe actually have a history and have some, again, have this larger identity already that maybe you can leverage in your product that gets the user going a little bit faster. And again, it becomes more of like my passport online versus anything else. And I can have multiple. I don't have to have one singular one. I can have multiple. And on something like Near, with the way the account model is structured, is I can actually have multiple identities that are really all connected to each other and that are really easy to manage without having to have all this separate stuff. So really, I think, like, what has been like the promise here of a lot of this stuff, and some of the things here when we talk about decentralized identity has been that, again, number one, is privacy. Okay. Because again, what is actually available? I mean, what actually was available and what actually is being shared is very clear. It's out in the open. You can see transactions on chain that are related to that user account. If you're asking the user to actually transact on something and to make some kind of claim or whatever else, that's all shown. So privacy becomes a big piece of that. Again, you are able to better really see, you know, where the user experience can kind of go south when you're building out your own system. So if you've ever built your own identity system and you have people log in, people create passwords, everything else, you can see where issues can come up. Again, obviously I mentioned recovery before. I think just setting passwords, resetting passwords, you are reliant on all of these different other setups now to really, I would say like just to manage the user experience. Like I have to have a mailing system. I have maybe a text messaging system, all these things to just make sure they can log in correctly. They can recover their password. They are who they say they are. All of those different type of things. Now, it's not that like a Web3 identity can't get hacked. Like, sure, someone could steal someone else's private keys and become that other user, and that's a problem in itself. So that is something that still needs to be considered, but that's a lot less likely. Also, too, again, like the where the incentives are, if we take away the financial incentives, right? So we're not talking about like the financial piece. The incentive to take over that stuff really becomes a lot less. So we're really thinking about this again as an identity system, as a login system, not as like I'm having this crypto wallet to go do X, Y, and Z, and I'm trying to buy stuff or swap tokens or what else. No, I'm just using this as an identity system. That changes that conversation a little bit too. Now, what I want to talk about here and why I think this is important for like the Web 2 discussion here as well is that I don't believe, in my opinion, that you have to actually just like switch over all the way to something like this. You can move to a decentralized identity system in kind of a hybrid model. One is that you could actually, have it as a separate option. So you can here's my standard login, here's Web 2 logins, and here's Web 3 logins. So that's one way to do it. You can also mix and match, which I'll talk about in a little bit, of like pulling some parts of Web 2 into Web 3. And then also you can start to make a full migration and say, like, we want to just use a centralized identity system. And the thing here is that I think it's important to consider of how you're actually going about doing this. So, what are the concerns that you have if you move to a full system, right? Well, one is like people complain about seed phrases. Well, chains are starting to better understand that this is a problem. This is actually slowing down adoption, and especially on Near, which has been baked in from day one on the protocol, is that you can actually do what's called account abstraction, and you don't actually have to surface the seed phrase to the user, and they can still use their account, and we can leverage it in different ways. So that becomes sometimes a concern. You also have the issue of, again, of like a crypto wallet. Okay. And again, this is not just Near, but I'm talking from the perspective of Near, since that's who I'm representing here, is that you can use account abstraction. You can use different ways to actually get around not having to use the wallet. If you are, and I think there are opportunities to integrate systems that do not involve the constant signing of transactions. That is what, again, slows things down. That's the part of, again, Web3 and crypto that often people complain about from a user experience standpoint of, oh, I'm waiting for a transaction. I'm waiting to sign something. This thing keeps popping up. I have to log into my wallet to just log into this app. It becomes cumbersome. So again, a place like Near, where we have account abstraction and you can actually separate that stuff, which again, I'm going to show a little bit more in depth in a bit here, starts to alleviate some of that. The other concern here too is, what data becomes public, because the blockchain is public, right? So anyone can go and see there. And so it becomes up to you of like how actually data is stored. Say how and what is stored. But again, encrypting different things and having people have their own encryption keys used by leveraging their wallet and the private keys that are tied to their wallet starts to again change that ownership structure and changes again the permissionless piece of that. And so that's where I think a lot of protocols are starting to better understand. And again, Near has done this from day one, that the more you can put into that account model to leverage those type of things, the better outcomes you can possibly have, and the more creative you can get with it. And we haven't really seen like the full potential of like actually really being fully creative and thinking outside the box of like how can you really leverage these type of things to give the end user a good experience on top of having them own their own data, truly having privacy, and truly allowing them to have some interoperability between other apps that are going to use the same system. So it can be a compelling use case if you can get there and you're willing to see it all the way through. So that's part of that too. So let's talk a little bit about like why why I think this is most important here, especially on Near. So Near does a couple of things out of the box that I think for anyone who's coming from Web 2, I think would really appreciate and really would make more sense to them of like how this stuff could work and how this stuff could transition without having to again get caught up in the stereotypes that come along with sometimes with like crypto and Web3. So one is Near's account model actually has human readable IDs. So for example, you might see something like everything. It's almost like a web URL. So there are these TLDs like .near, .tg, okay, that and there's a couple of the new ones here, but these are essentially like your top level domains. And then like I could have something like let's say here we'll just make it easy. I don't actually have this name, but all right, so I could have like joe.near. And joe.near becomes my account, and now that's really easy. I don't have this long string, right? So it's not see these wallets with a string of numbers and letters. Nope, I can just have a name. So just like your email address, whatever else. So that makes it really easy. I can also have all different kinds of keys attached to this that have different permissions level. So I don't just have one single private key and public key. I can actually attach which like limited access keys that don't allow any like funds transferring. I can have and this is actually before I go any further. So this account is actually really just a smart contract, and so what that means is that you can build in code and logic to do different things. So it's not just about like, hey, this is just a dumb address that is holding something. No, you can actually build interactivity directly into because it's actually a smart contract, not just a placeholder. The other thing is too, so now as I was saying is that you can start adding all these extra keys to it. So now joe.near can have this whole series of keys of, hey, when I interact with this app, this is limited access key. No one actually gets my full access key because there's no reason for it. I'm just using my identity provider here. So there's no issue about like transferring of funds or anything else like that. There also is opportunities here in Near to do something that was basically through what's called relayers. And once they've authenticated, so like, oh, okay, this is actually Joe because they've actually, logged into their account. The relayers can actually handle all the transactions. And so now like you are not asking the user to hold any tokens. You're not asking them to like, buy any crypto. You're not asking them to do any of that stuff. Like they are just like, this is just purely an identity provider, and you can handle all those transactions yourself. And with how inexpensive Near transactions are, like you really start to have this system that can be very efficient and does not involve your users having any kind of concerns about funds lost or anything else like that. So that doesn't really become an issue. Again, you can, with going back to the access keys, is like you really don't also have to concern too much yourself about like having security lapses because of the limited access key part of it. As long as you're assigning that proper key and to them, then like you can't even like accidentally do something wrong because like the key is limited in what it can actually do. So you can't like even like accidentally send funds or something like that. So you don't have to worry about that. Now, what's also neat is that within Near is that you can actually easily build in some like things like social recovery. You can do multi-signature if you needed to for something that needed added security. We don't have, obviously. And then you can actually do all of this though through things like JavaScript. You don't have to just always build out these smart contracts. There's a JavaScript API that you can just drop in and you can leverage that. And so you have all these opportunities to really do that. So it's not about like just having this like feature of, oh, here's this account model that I can, do some cool things with. Like, no, it actually becomes like, hey, you can actually really build a real digital identity that becomes really pretty interesting long term if you start to truly leverage it. So on DevHub's other shows, so we do a live show every week on Thursdays called DevHub Live, aptly named. And we had a developer come on and talk about some of the advantages of the account model here. And when you start to think about all the possibilities, when like, hey, the account is a smart contract, right? So, could I embed, like a small website, code for a small website within that account? Because we also have decentralized front ends on Near. So can my we'll call it like my business card, my website, my personal website, can that be embedded into my account? And that account can then travel with me. And now it's like this becomes this whole thing that if you really want to peel back the layers, you could get very creative with this. So, and no one's really done that yet. That's something that's still new, but these are the opportunities that are there. And if I combine that with stuff that I'm doing in Web 2, so like, because the challenge becomes like where if you are a long-term Web 2 builder, you're very used to certain processes and you're used to maybe how you handle other data and your rest of your product. And so maybe you don't want to make this full transition. You don't maybe see a use right now for smart contracts for certain things. That's totally cool. You could still leverage this identity stuff in a way that I think really makes sense because again, this is all on here. You can use this JavaScript. You don't have to learn Rust for smart contracts. You don't have to go through all of that, and you get a really interesting possible experience. Now, if you bake in things like social recovery, if you bake in things like other ways to reclaim your keys, or you've abstracted the seed phrase away from how that goes through like different cryptographic practices and stuff like that, you can fix that issue of, oh, I lost my seed phrase. So now that doesn't become an issue either. Now you're giving them this experience of user ownership, of account ownership, and you've taken away some of the fears. And you can only do that on a few chains right now. And so, and Near is one of them. And so I think it's important to really kind of go through all of that of like, hey, can I really get creative here with some of that stuff? Okay. Designing some of these features here. So let's talk a little bit about actually what this kind of looks like, because I think this is important. Let me I want to share part of my screen here. Let's see if I can find the image here. Okay. All right, let's bring this up. Here we go. All right, awesome. So look, this is what I would consider. Here we go. Let's go back to the other view. Nope. Nah, it's a little better. Anyways, oh, here we go. There we go. So look, this is kind of what happens right now. That I think you could really start to integrate a blockchain into your Web 2 app. And the way you see this looks is like it looks similar to kind of how OAuth is structured. So again, user signs into the Web 2 app, you're going to have things like approving the connection still. You still have to, have a way to kind of sign in. You're verifying the identity against a smart contract. The blockchain obviously doing this. This is all happening right in like parallel in some form. Sometimes it's happening right after. It can all happen pretty immediately as well. And then what happens here is that you just, once they've been identified and they verify that they've logged in, the blockchain says, yep, this is them, and you give them access. And it's really fairly straightforward. It's very, again, similar to if you saw a workflow of, OAuth, it would look very similar to this structure as well. And so when you are considering, again, like what your workflow is going to be, you say, well, how do I start to integrate something like this into my Web 2 app? It's like, well, if you've integrated OAuth, like you can do that as well, because it's really a very similar process. It's not too much harder to do. And again, when you use something like Near that has like these JavaScript SDKs and the API structure that's set up right out of the box, like you can integrate this right into your app directly as it is. And so that is something that I think is an interesting approach to do. And again, this is where you have room to experiment. And so what I like about this is, here, let me come back to this here. So one of the things that we can start to consider a little bit here is, if I have my app here, I can actually do something like this where I'm gonna do this where, so like this is maybe, let's say like I make this actually Google, right? So here's my user. So, and then I can have my Web3 thing here. And the reason why I want to show this here is that because I, as a user, I can actually, maybe first I still want to integrate, like I want to have still have Google as my possible sign-in or whatever, any OAuth type of thing. Maybe I give them that sheet that comes up for some apps, right? Like it's sign in with Google, sign in with Apple, sign in with whatever. You could still do all of those things, and then you could have them, authenticate their email, and that email can then be what drives the Web3 account. And then so this is where the recovery comes in. And so now you have this like hybrid approach. And sure, it's not like the perfect example of like fully decentralizing, because now you're still reliant on this piece, but it's still a step forward and it's still a nice opportunity. You can also really leverage here, and this page is getting busy. Let's go with a different page here. So you probably see a lot now on the web is you can use passkeys. So this is where I think really start to change a lot of things. So what a passkey is that you can use a biometric that creates a secure private key based off your biometric, on your phone, on your device. You can do it on many laptops now too, but definitely like your phone. And what it does is it creates this passkey that is associated with your account. And on Near, this can actually lead to essentially private keys, which in turn is an account. And now I don't actually need to see these anymore, right? So I don't actually need to see this. I just need to log in with my passkey, and I have access to my account. And so now, like, we've used account abstraction here on Near, using passkeys to actually now log into my account, and I've now separated that all out. So that is a really awesome opportunity where now I am giving my users the decentralized nature of this, the permissionless nature of it, use their own data, all that stuff. All they need is a passkey. So I've actually eliminated the need for some of the social recovery and everything else. They don't even have to give me an email address. They can just sign in with a passkey. They can create a username, they want to use, so long as the username is available on Near, and then they can, have a passkey tied to that, and now they have an account and they're off and running. And again, through the power of relayers, they never actually have to go and get tokens. They don't have to get coins. They don't have to hold anything. You can manage all this for them as the product themselves, and other products can do this as well. So now I've logged in to your app using my passkey. I have this account. I can take this account to other places now and do that. And use my same account in other places. Right? And this is all done, again, with like no tokens are needed here for the end user. Okay. And so now I'm not worried about the part that sometimes like scares people right now from crypto because they don't really understand some of the token stuff. It's like, no problem. But we think we value the user own part of your identity. You can do all this stuff here. So I think that's a really important piece here as well. We can certainly talk about a lot about like wallets and things like that, but I just don't think that's overly relevant right now. The part here that I do think, again, is most important is that, again, I'm using the word wallet in here in this example, but it really, again, it's just your account essentially, right? So your wallet is your account name, and we're just making sure that we're verifying that's what it is. And so now if I sign with that pass key, again, it verifies, yep, this is the right person, this is the right keys, on the checks on chain, returns it back, and we're off and running. Again, now the blockchain here for Near, again, is that trustless environment. So as long as the chain is up, which it has always been up since day one, as long as people can access it, which people always can because it's an L1, there's no other roll up to it. There's no, it's all right there, linear on chain that you can go through and do that. Okay. There's a lot of different ways, again, that you can start to get creative with it, but I want to just highlight one way that I think this is, that you can actually make use of this here. And so let me share my screen here one more time, and we're gonna go through this piece of code here just as an example, so you can see kind of how straightforward this actually really is. So let's bring this up, maybe really tiny. Okay, that's fine. I'm so small here, but here, there we go. That's a little better. Okay, so I'm going to use the example that I mentioned before of like, let's use Google Auth to actually authenticate the user and their email address. And so we can actually know who they are. And then we're going to create a Near account with that email. And then we're going to store the information quasi-securely. Like, so this is not, I will say, do not use this actual code. Do not actually put this in production. This is not fully secure. This is not a best practice, but the goal here is I'm really just actually trying to show you how straightforward this can be. But please do not follow this. This is not actually truly a secure way of doing this, but this is a hypothetical of how you can start to simplify this stuff. So this is the go. This is just JavaScript, right? So you just have, Near has its own API. You have to obviously configure again how you're going to connect to Near. So we just have set up the testnet, but it doesn't matter. For what we're trying to talk about here is again the .testnet. So if you're not familiar, so as I showed, like the joe.near, like this is just another top level domain of .testnet, which is on the test network versus obviously the mainnet network. So here's how the example really works, right? So I think this is, again, if you overcomplicate it in your head, you haven't actually seen it before, this hopefully makes sense. So I authenticate against the Google to make sure like they are who they say they are regarding their email. And from that, we're going to get back their email address. And what's nice here is that like they have been verified by Google. This is actually their email address. So we're not just asking them to enter an email address. They've actually proven it. So we don't even have to actually send like a secondary follow-up email like, oh, this is really you, and confirm your email. So that actually streamlines some of that user experience as well. This is also similar for like when you use like passkeys to set up as well. When they come back to your site, instead of them having to confirm something else again, as long as that passkey matches, which will match up to their private key, they're in. So like that's where that comes into. But this example again, we're using email. Now this is where like this is not like super secure. So please do not do this. This is certainly can be hacked. But I just really want to just highlight again what we talk about, like when you can start to simplify some of this stuff. Okay, so we can actually make like a unique account ID that's based off of the email address, and then we can actually again set up, from there we're gonna have like a secret key that then is generated and all that stuff. And we're going to create a new account, and you can see here like we we as the app are going to actually, pay for the initial funding for that to get the account created. Uh, you know, this is just one way to do it of like, have an existing account to sponsor, but we don't have to do that either. There's actually more simple ways to do that now. But this again is just a high level example. Now I've stored these in in memory. Here's the account, here's the thing, and now they have an account and they're off and running. Okay. It's really kind of straightforward. And this is kind of a silly example, but not a lot of code to do like a really simple sign up thing that works and creates a key and is tied to their user account. And here again, like we're just trying to show kind of what this looks like. But really, all you have to do here again is you're just adding another layer that is pretty lightweight, and you're just saying that again, based off of what's coming from Google Authentication, that is the verifier. You can do that. The part that again I want to really highlight that I think is really most important here is is really where's my thing? I don't want this one. Where was I talking about this? Is this one here? This really is the passkeys part of it. I think passkeys are greatly underutilized right now, especially in the Web3 space, because now you've eliminated to have to use that, that Web2 type of setup. Again, you can certainly make this hybrid approach that I think is pretty neat and could provide a nice user experience and still achieve most of what you want to achieve. But here with passkeys, you don't have to have them write down and memorize that private key. You start to separate some of the stuff out. You can still have all the same interoperability. You don't have to have them have tokens. You can use the relayers. You can do all this stuff. This is all abstracted away by using passkeys. And to me, if I'm starting to move my product into more, again, a decentralized manner, I want to put more ownership into the end user. I think it's a really great opportunity to go and say, like, hey, let's just start with passkeys. Let's get you going. Let's get you in the app and go from there. What you then do after that is really kind of endless. Like, you have a lot of opportunities to really get creative again off of this. So there's a lot here, but at the same time, I do feel like this is a simple process, because again, if I am just simply trying to integrate in my to my overall setup a better way to authenticate my user, to again give them more control, to give them more stuff, if the initiating and the sign up part is with a passkey, right? So here up in this top part here, okay, so right up here, if I say, okay, I'm going to initiate the login setup and I'm just going to have you use a passkey, all right, and then this part here where like request wallet connection, like you can almost skip that. So you don't have to even really actually pull up an actual wallet per se. You're just kind of saying, okay, let's approve that connection. You've verified you through your passkey, not through having to sign into a wallet with a seed phrase. And now you can verify your identity. There are some wallets here on Near that are using passkeys. So like Bite, which is a wallet here that uses both AI and passkeys, that I think is a nice opportunity to use that as well if you want to provide a wallet experience. But if you don't want to provide a wallet experience and you want to do it yourself, you can do that. And so you can do all of that through here, and now you've given them that opportunity to have both things. So look, overall, I there's a lot of ways that you can argue both sides of having a decentralized identity. And you can make the case from a user experience. For a while, you used to be able to say, well, it's a better user experience to have it centralized. So my point is that it's not anymore. So we're now at a point where, I think through some of the things that we have here, let me put this back up, that we don't actually have to have, you can't make the argument that just Web 2 is necessarily a better experience. You can actually really simplify that. You can eliminate some steps that go on in Web 2 that don't have to happen in Web 3. You can give people more power and better identity controls using Web 3. So these are things that I do think should be considered now in any architecture of your app. And if it's not being considered right now, and you need some help and you want to talk it through, you can certainly come and talk to us at DevHub. We'll certainly walk you through it. It's a great opportunity to also experiment a little bit of like, how do I start to merge Web3 stuff into my Web2 product without going full Web3, without having, again, we don't have to ever use the words crypto. We don't ever have to use the word, any tokens. We're not talking about any of that part of it. We're simply talking about privacy and user-owned data and that identity management that is truly permissionless and flexible. So this is just kind of a brief introduction to kind of how some of this stuff works. My goal here hopefully is that you are starting to consider other options of how to do identity management besides the traditional ones of OAuth and big centralized systems. You do not have to go, and the moral of the story here is too, you do not have to go like full on, all decentralized, all everything, just to have a better experience for your end users and to start leveraging some of this stuff in your product. So, if you have questions, if you're watching this again on replay, come to the Telegram group, reach out to us on our socials. We're really happy to help with anyone who's maybe kind of stuck. If you're having more questions and things like that. Let me pull up the other. If you are already building, or if you're working already, let's say the hackathon, things like that, you can come to our support Telegram channel and get some support. And our DevRels are always ready there, as well as the community. The community is really there always to help as well too. So please check that out. We will likely be back the end of the week, as we have been, to kind of wrap up and talk about some different things. We'll talk more about integrating some of these Web3 features into your Web2 product and what are some of the benefits there. What are some things to consider? I will leave you with this right now. There's an awesome opportunity to innovate and to be creative. And if you are a developer who feels like, you want to make a mark for yourself and, set a new standard and try new things and really experiment, there is a lot of opportunity here to do that. And, there's a lot of stuff that right now feels repetitive and maybe stale and everything else. And, if you just come in and you just copy what's being done here in Web3, sure, it's going to feel the same. But there's a lot of opportunity, especially here at Near with the different account models and structure, that if you want to take that time, you want to really push the limits, if you want to get creative, it's an awesome place to come and do that because of some of these flexibilities that I talked about today. And it's much more than just identity. We'll talk more about some of the other stuff, features that are here, but I think identity management is one of the low-hanging fruits that you can actually make a really pretty cool experience and really start to change again the paradigm of how things are considered on the web for your end users. So that's what you're really building for, right? You're building for your end users. So something to consider. Again, please check out everything that's kind of scrolling down below. Big thing, really, the hackathon coming up here in September, kicking off. Please make sure that you are checking that out. I think it's a great opportunity, even if you are a Web 2 dev and you're not really sure. Check out the hackathon. It's a great way to kind of get your feet wet. Tons of prizes, over $500,000 worth of prizes in here. Sign up for our newsletter as well, so that way you can get updated about all the different events that are going on and kind of, any tips and tricks for new things that are coming out as well. And if you have any questions, again, always please reach out to us. But until then, this has been another edition of Wake Up and Ship More. And again, I am your host, Joe. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and keep shipping. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.